So what's stopping politicians from moving on this front? I always remember that great line of Paul Keating's that politics and leadership is not about being popular, it's about being right. And in this sense, drugs policy is one of those classics where the politicians know that the war on drugs is lost. They know that because they're not stupid, they can see the evidence. They are told by the criminal justice system that it doesn't work, and the criminal justice system is beginning to vote with its feet and move to drug courts, which, by the way, one of the problems with drug courts is they're not fully extended through the system, so they're not utilised in a Supreme Court or district courts in many states. They should be right through the system. At the moment, they're mainly in the magistrates or local courts. Politicians know this, and yet have we ever seen a politician in this country stand up and say, the war on drugs is lost, we have to move to a harm minimisation approach, we have to head down the path, the very successful path of Portugal, which headed down this path in 2001, and where, by the way, no one seriously suggests in Portugal on any side of the political fence that they should move back to a criminalisation approach. One of the problems is this, it's the media. And in particular, it's the corrosive impact of the tabloid media in this country, namely the Daily Telegraph and namely the Herald Sun. When the Greens, a number of years ago, talked about decriminalisation policies, the Herald Sun and the Daily Telegraph ran the most vicious campaigns against the Greens. I'm no great fan of the Greens on a whole range of issues, but on this one they were absolutely right. And they were demonised by certain journalists at News Limited. It was an appalling display of fear-mongering. It did the community no good at all in terms of advancing the debate. And don't worry, it'll happen again. We are talking about newspapers which peddle lines on law and order which simply are based on fear, which have no basis in fact, and in relation to drugs or child sex offenders, any other form of crime, they simply follow what they think is a lowest common denominator, fear-ridden populist line. It is one of the biggest barriers to politicians heading down a more sensible path. Because if politicians look, for example, from the budgetary perspective, and state and federal governments in this country over the past 10 to 15 years have become more rigorous, in theory anyway, in relation to budget matters, and they're now all into KPIs and all the other management speak. Whenever the Attorney-General and the Minister for Corrections and the Minister for Health come before the Expenditure Review Committee of any state or federal government of any persuasion, they must surely look at these numbers on drug offenders and say, well, we're not really getting bang for our buck, are we? Because as you've heard from our previous speakers, drugs are more readily available today than they ever have been. Our courts are full of drug offenders. 80 or 90% of crime on any one day being dealt with in the magistrates' court is drug-related, either directly or indirectly. We wouldn't have had underbelly 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 or 6 if it weren't for drugs. Drugs are the basis of the criminal justice system, and those who want to play outside it and those who want to play within it. But quite seriously, we are not getting bang for our buck. So even if you want to take away the social and human rights perspectives, just looking at sheer numbers and looking at how we spend our taxpayers' dollars, this is one of the most wasteful areas of budgetary spending. Now, the Herald Sun and the Daily Telegraph are very good, and various other tabloid outfits like Neil Mitchell in Melbourne, etc., are very good at talking about governments wasting money on bureaucrats going on overseas trips, petty sums of money, but they never look at one of the biggest items of expenditure, which is the police, which is corrective services, and which is the law and justice budget generally. And the billions of dollars literally wasted by police each year on ridiculous law enforcement. I see the consequences, I see the absurdity of, police in their heavy-handed way, generally, going into someone's house, arresting a backyard operation where they're dealing in amphetamines and selling to friends. They all end up before the courts. They're all done for trafficking or for manufacturing. They nearly always go to jail, and if they don't go to jail, they get a suspended sentence. A much better approach would be to deal with harm minimisation, to deal with a group of people who've got to a particular position that they've got to, generally in the criminal justice system because of various forms of deprivation, and deal with those people in a way which addresses the root cause of the offending. Simply going through the courts locking them up, warehousing them, and then coming out and getting back into trafficking, where they can make an easy buck, by the way, much easier buck sometimes than getting out into an employment market which stigmatises against people who've been to prison. It would be a much more effective way with dealing with matters. So I'm going to finish up on this note by saying, in terms of confidence in our criminal justice system, you can have none when it comes to current drug policies. Two, when it comes to waste of taxpayers' money, serious waste of taxpayers' money and epidemic waste of taxpayers' money at a federal and state level in Australia, you can thank the war on drugs. And thirdly, to make this point, that it is inevitable that we will move in this country towards harm minimisation. That's where, as Alex said, the trend is going globally. Australia are always, unfortunately, a bit behind some of the trends, but at some point we'll stop listening to the Americans, and we'll actually understand. We'll actually understand that when it comes to drugs, harm minimisation, the Portuguese route, things that are happening now in Argentina, in Brazil, parts of the world where you wouldn't expect them to be happening, will be the way forward for Australia. Thank you.
Thanks for that, Greg. Thanks to all our speakers. I'm now going to invite questions from the floor. We have a number of roving microphones, I think, which shall go to you in a moment. Can I just say three things, please? I did one of these sessions yesterday. We've got 25 minutes. I think they'll pass very quickly. Would you mind saying at first to whom your question is directed, if it's directed to one person? And please try and keep your questions short, and I'll just limit it to one question per person. Thanks.
Hi. Oh, is this on? Hi. My name is Ina. I just wanted to share something briefly and get the panel's thoughts on it. I was actually teetotal from right up until I hit my late 20s for no other reason than it was a personal choice. So I didn't happen to drink and I didn't happen to do any drugs, hadn't even smoked a spliff. What really gets me about this whole debate is the hypocrisy that goes on around it, because when I did hit my late 20s, I suddenly found myself working in the media at parties where the best drugs and the cleanest drugs that were offered to me were by people who happened to be police officers, or who happened to be lawyers, or pharmacists or doctors. Why? Because they could get their hands on the better stuff than the average person on the street. So the whole layers of hypocrisy in it are something that really bother me. And also, just to get your ideas on that as well, the idea that we seem in society really scared of talking about this idea, as if somehow our children are going to be corrupted by it and they're not going to be able to make their own choices around this issue. And yet we allow people to smoke, and people to drink, and people to eat McDonald's. You know, we have so much shit in the food and the water that we consume every single day that this is such a diversion of a pointless diversion of energy to just keep focusing on drugs bad, drugs bad, drugs bad. What about personal choice? Because we're putting all sorts of poisons into our body every day and don't even realise. So really, nobody's really addressed the issue of hypocrisy particularly, and I wondered if the panel had any ideas or thoughts around that as well.
Okay, would you like to nominate one of the speakers to answer that?
Oh, whoever feels.
Okay.
Oh, you want me to answer? Peter Farris, who's a controversial Melbourne lawyer and with whom I disagree on most things, but he's a good mate of mine, once said that the bar in Melbourne was riddled with barristers taking cocaine, and he got absolutely pilloried by people. How dare he say it? But the defensiveness, I think, proved your point.